cashier. Get the money like a cashier. Customer, clientele. I was broke, that was last year. Getting money like a cashier. Get the money like a cashier. Benjamin, nothing less. I was broke, that was last year. Don't change 'em. I never switched up. Been down since day one. Steady social. People change them.
And welcome.
Hey, welcome everybody.
My name is Marcus.
I'm Kevin.
Mike Carter, aka the Paperboy. Good evening. Good evening.
Yeah, this we short tonight, but maybe that's a good thing.
You know what? Sometimes we have so many people. It's all good. We got a very important guest today, so I'm super excited anyway. You know, I just want to go ahead and get this popping off because we got a bunch of really high power stuff to talk about. So I want to go ahead and bring on Representative Mike Weissman.
In the house. In the house.
Hey, there he is.
There we go.
How's it going, Mr. Weissman?
It's going. You know, Kevin, you were talking about having a really important guest. I must be expecting somebody else to join. I don't know. So it's going, you know. We are coming into the last couple of key crazy weeks of the session. A lot of big bills are in play. Actually, right before hopping on here, I was just looking at our calendar for the coming week, and we're going to have some late nights finishing all this stuff up. We got a bunch of big bills still in the system, big wins for the people of the state if we get them done, and I believe we'll get most of them done. But, you know, this past Tuesday, we were there till about 12. Wednesday, I was there in committee till almost 9. Thursday was 2:30 in the morning, so 2:30 a.m. Friday. A lot of long debates, a lot of filibusters. It's takes a little while longer than it should to get some big things done, but we got to get them done, so we do it.
Well, that's good. That's really important stuff. We had heard some negative news coming out of the Capitol as well. I mean, if we can go ahead and talk about that, get that kind of out of the way, and we can start talking about some of the positive stuff as well. I mean, or however y'all want to go, Paperboy.
Well, you know, your show. Look, I mean, we're not here to avoid the tough conversations. That's what I like about how you organize these. So what happened? And I think this was Wednesday. We were in the middle of a debate, and there's a particular Republican member who doesn't regulate his speech very well, let's just say. And he used a very derogatory term, and it caused the House to go into recess while some of that was sorted out. Hey, Kevin, before I dive in, I'm hearing an echo. I want to make sure I'm not doing something wrong in my settings to messing things up here.
Yeah, we were chatting. I was trying to figure that out. I muted myself, and it was still happening. I'm not sure exactly. If anyone has a second audio sources, just mute. And go ahead, Mike.
Okay, I'll pick up. Anyway, so it was, you know, the person who said this is somebody who for all the months so far has been sort of saying things of a nature and of a length that we've somewhat all gotten used to and become frustrated by. But this was sort of a new level. It's like just when you think you found the floor, somebody pulls out a jackhammer and goes through the floor. It was really horrible. You know, it caused the speaker, I think, to spend a lot of the rest of the day talking with members of both parties about, you know, how to repair the breach, how to start to have consequences for that kind of conduct and make sure that it doesn't happen again, and try to just start to put the decorum of the chamber and the expectations of members back together. You know, something was out there on Newsweek about this. It's not good when our state makes national news in this kind of way, or when our state legislature makes national news in this kind of way. Some things were said at the well Thursday in terms of trying to acknowledge what went wrong, and frankly, the need for everybody to act better. And I don't know, I think it's going to be a work in progress. You know, it's not the first time that something like that has been said. I wish it would be the last time. I'm sorry to say I don't have total confidence in that. As it happens, Thursday afternoon after committee, I had some pretty violent words spoken against me by a member of a committee that I serve on. And I'm not going to go into that too much here, but all of it just ties together in that, we've been through 4 or 5 years, 6 years in this country where people of a certain political persuasion have found it expedient to talk in increasingly violent and explicitly, racial and racist terms. And that has given license for a lot of other things to happen, both in political discourse and in everyday discourse. And it is not okay. And, we as a legislature have to grapple with that.
So, Mike, you see this comment at the bottom down here, censure, expulsion from Brian Lindstrom. What is your thoughts on the consequences? I actually saw the video. I watched the video, and I saw you get up. Looked like you was ready to handle business if you had to, but I think I was just kind of blown away. I was really kind of blown away. Civility no longer exists.
No, I mean, look, I mean, the Capitol is a place for debate. It is a place for a contest of ideas. We know going in, not everybody's going to agree with us all the time. That's fine. Filibuster, you want to get up, you want to run 100 amendments. Okay, we saw that the other night. That's how come we were there till 2:30 in the morning. Apparently, public option and giving people health care is more controversial than you would think. But there has to be a line, and that line was grotesquely crossed Wednesday. And I think we all had the same reaction. We're like, what? I mean, there were staff over on the side, who hadn't initially heard it, who were doing the replay from Colorado Channel on their phone. And they're like, what? I mean, in this place, really? Said by one colleague, in the direction of another colleague. So to Brian's question, to expel a member takes 2/3 under the Constitution. We did that 3 years ago and 3 years and 2 months ago with Steve Lipsock, a former member who had quite a chain of allegations about sexual harassment and retaliation against him. The next level of consequence below that is a resolution of censure. That takes a simple majority. It has happened, as far as I know, once in all of Colorado history. That was, I'd have to look it up, close to 10 years ago, early part of the 2010s. It might have been the late aughts. Douglas Bruce, the guy who brought us Tabor, was briefly in the Colorado legislature. That was before my time. Opening day, or near to opening day one year, he kicked a reporter. Reporter was down on his knees or something, aiming the lens up, taking a picture, and for whatever reason, Douglas Bruce felt that reporter was not being appropriately respectful. And he actually kicked him, like physically kicked him. It's crazy. So he was censured for that. He might have been removed from a committee by Republican leadership. I'd have to double check on that part. That is the one instance of censure that I can think of. Then there's things like, his leadership could take him off of a committee. There's a whole menu of things that could happen. I mean, there's talk that maybe he is going to go through some kind of training about racial awareness. I don't know for sure if that's going to happen. Look, I think this is still in play. I mean, I was just talking to the speaker about it the other morning. I know that other members are doing the same, because it's not an isolated incident. It is only the latest and perhaps the worst, but still in a chain of just ongoing things in that place.
I'm not surprised that it occurred. I'm disappointed that it occurred, but I'm just not surprised, because it just tends to be the nature of people of the Republican Party, that Donald Trump has ushered in this sense of speak your inner heart, behave your inner way. And that side always tends to keep pushing the limits on what new dog whistles can we discover, how much further can we push the envelope. And these are the deplorables. The great prophet, Hillary Rodham Clinton, stated that the deplorables will come out, and they have come out, and they're out here. They are sticking around like roaches in the projects, or, it seems like we just can't get rid of them like herpes. And I have no idea what's it going to take. I'm sick of sorries. I don't believe that training's like therapy. It will not work unless you're open to it working. As old as he is, and with him never having any bars to access to education, I'm amazed. Like, I'm not really amazed. Like, there's no excuses as to why he doesn't know better. And just for the record, the he that I'm speaking of is Representative Richard Holtford, Holtorf, for those who might be interested in reaching out to him.
I think we can put his information up if you would
Yeah,
like.
yeah, look, that's right. That's the individual that we're speaking of. He represents the Eastern Plains. It's a rural district consisting of 11 counties. Look, I appreciate the point about therapy. You have to want it to work. You have to deeply in yourself feel that something is wrong and needs to be fixed. And when we speak of therapy and counseling and recovery, and look, like being on judiciary, chairing judiciary, getting to know people who come to that committee and that space. I've come to know a lot of people who've had to grapple with harm, with recovering from awful things that have happened in their life, like sexual violence, like domestic violence, like suffering a crime, things like that. But therapy, in that sense, is kind of like making yourself better. Mm-hmm. And you still have to want to do it in some ways that can be hard sometimes, maybe getting over alcohol, drugs, things of this sort. But what we're talking about here is grappling with something in yourself that is actually really harmful to other people. And in this case, in a very public way, when you are a state representative in Colorado. So, I think it's right that you have to want to do it. And you have to see the problem that needs to be addressed before you can really let that into yourself and let it change you, as here it needs to change you. But, it's like the stakes are even higher because it's not just about one person and his or her private life. It's about what's going on in the public realm in our state. So it's all the more important.
Mike, if I can get in here real quick.
Yeah.
The question of therapy, I don't think therapy is the issue. I don't think if he has some type of, we speak about it, a road to Damascus moment, that's not the issue. The voters in that part of the state rose up and elected him. Okay? The voter, he's out there. He is speaking to those voters who are fine with the words that came out of his mouth. So the next step is, what do the Republicans do specifically with him? And what kind of, not an example, but what do they do with him? Like, we are not going to tolerate this, or we are going to tolerate this. Right.
Yeah, look, thank you for reframing. I'm only picking up on the therapy thing, because by analogy, because Hashi went there, and there's something to that. But the point I'm trying to make is like that's not the perfect metaphor. And what you're saying is ultimately more real and important. So go back a couple of years. The former representative for that district was a lady named Kimmy Lewis. She was battling cancer, and she actually passed away, within the last year or so. She wasn't that old. It was actually very tragic. She was extremely conservative, ran some bills that most of the rest of us didn't agree with. But I don't recall that she ever said this kind of thing. She did not go down to the well and holler and say things and come right up to the line of imputing motive on, frankly, a daily basis. And then say things like this. She was a person in the building where you might have really, really disagreed with her, but you sort of respected her for where she was, what she believed, and how she advocated for her district, and she managed to do so in a respectful way. And I even voted for at least one of her bills because I thought it was the right thing. It had to do with special districts. Anyway, so she passed away. And under Colorado law, what happens is there's a vacancy committee. And in this case, it was a contested vacancy committee. I don't remember too much about the other people going through that. But that is the process that originally brought now Representative Holtorf. So that was a choice made by that district. And then, I guess he won the full election in 20. And, it's like you see this playing out on the national stage, this whole business with Liz Cheney, who is a conservative Republican and the daughter of one of the most conservative, powerful Republicans ever to be on the national stage in this country in 50 years. Vice President of the United States, a former cabinet level secretary. I'm talking about Dick Cheney. She is a conservative Republican, and she's on the verge of getting kicked out of leadership in her own party by this new wave of individuals who have come in and have been empowered and motivated by Donald Trump. So I think that there is a war going on for the heart and soul of the party, frankly, in the state and the country. And we're all dealing with the consequences of that war. And look, like, we're a two-party system, okay? There's always going to be a party that has a different set of views than us. And we just have to win the contest for ideals and ideology and elections, and have the votes that we need to move our values over the values of that other party. That's one thing. But when you have a party that, isn't so much about ideas and winning elections fair and square and all that, and is turning into what it's turning into, it's a real problem. It's a real problem in this country.
And I will argue and push back and say, I don't think there's a soul or a heart over there.
But then that doesn't get us anywhere. Realistically, that doesn't get us anywhere.
So what has it gotten us?
We what needs to happen, we have sent Mike to the legislature to advocate for our rights and for our state. If a portion of our state, if we have decided that they are completely soulless and human, what does that get us? I don't
know. We're at the same place that's gotten us at believing that they have a heart and that they have souls. Exactly where we are right now. Woo-hoo.
Well, see, here's something I actually think about this when I see something like that happen on Wednesday or other times. We get to talking about heart and soul and whatnot. We all represent ballpark of 85,000 people in our district, plus or minus. I don't think every single one of the human beings out there in the Eastern Plains is like that. I really, truly don't. They're not. The real tragedy of it. Okay, look, some of these counties are very low income. Some of the lowest income counties in the state of Colorado are in that district. Some of these counties struggle to have an economic base other than private prisons, which I don't think any of us support. These are rural counties where agriculture is important. They suffer from low commodity prices. They suffer from drought. They suffer from lack of broadband. They suffer from school districts with a lack of funding. They suffer maybe from opioids, and just there's a lot of issues that 85,000 people in that district and any district need somebody to go to the Capitol and really be effective in advocating for them on those issues. And I don't know. I mean, if I were me, or even a conservative version of me, whatever that looks like, I might feel that there was kind of a gap there in terms of what happens in the name of District 64 right now. That's just me.
Well, I guess here's the thing for me. I guess I'm at the point where I don't watch the news much anymore. I do, unfortunately, follow Twitter, which seems to be my source of, at least it's the jump off to me going to look at news things if I need to. But I think it's been made very clear that unfortunately the folks across the aisle, at least at the federal level, their only goal is to prevent the current administration from doing anything at this stage.
Which was the goal under 8 years of Obama. Let's be straight. We've seen this before.
Right. We sure did. And I guess if anything of trickle down economics has ever worked, maybe trickle down economics doesn't work, but sure does trickle down monolithic belief of we're going to make things worse for everyone else, which it seems to be the mantra of the Republican Party at this stage, that it has gone from the federal level all the way down to the state level. So I guess my position is this, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this, Mike. Maybe it's just time to just, quite frankly, just say, put all that, try to stop trying to reach across the islands. Let's just get things done for the majority of people, which is the majority who want things to get done. I see valor and reaching across the aisle, but I don't see it being reciprocated. So why not just move forward and just do what y'all got to do at this stage and get things done?
Well, look, Yeah, key question. I mean, we're lucky in this state to have a 41 to 24 majority in the House after last election, a little bit bigger, 20 to 15 in the Senate. So my attitude is we earn those majorities in elections, where people actually have a pretty easy time voting in Colorado, and we work to keep it that way. We earn majorities to use them when we need to. And there are times when we need to, like this public option debate. It's honestly a pretty incremental change to how health insurance works in the state. But we had to endure, I don't know, 10, 11 hours of just like crazy talk and filibuster and stuff the other night. But we are going to get that law done at the end of the day. And we are going to have cheaper health care for people in the state because we won the majorities by which to do it. To the core point about like how to relate to the other party, to me, it's person by person. There are people who have demonstrated like where they're at. And then there are people who may be very conservative and are not with us most of the time. But at least speaking for myself as one legislator, I won't speak for any of my colleagues, I can still talk to them. I still do talk to them. I still try to persuade them to vote with me or vote with us. And it works sometimes and it doesn't work sometimes. There are some members who, again, they may be very conservative. I may disagree with them most of the time, but they do sometimes join onto bills with us and are part of getting meaningful policy done. Obviously, like it's not going to become law if majority of the Democrats don't support it in the current configuration. But I don't think you're totally devoid of good ideas just because you have the different letter after your name. Obviously, there's always that letter has always meant that there's an ideological gulf, and it's bigger now. I think that we have seen the drift over the years. I mean, I remember reading this article in the Denver Post 13, 14 years ago. Think about how long ago that was in terms of what's happened to politics in this country. Mm-hmm. And it was making the point as of the late aughts, just about the then changes that you could observe in the Republican Party of Colorado. You would go back to the 80s, the 90s, and there were all these moderate Republican women that used to get elected out of places like Denver. Think about it. Denver used to elect Republicans. And these folks could not win a Republican primary now. And the point that this article was making is that they, in fact, were not winning Republican primaries as long ago as the mid-aughts. One example that they were using is there was a member, terming out of the state senate, long-time kind of respected elder stateswoman, and she had a preferred successor who was a moderate Republican woman cut from her own cloth. And then the other guy was this sort of more firebrand conservative Republican guy. Guess who won? We see that happening all over the state, all over the country. So coming into this current cycle, 22, term limits in Colorado being what they are, it's really going to matter, like who stands for it in these primaries in these heavily Republican areas, mm-hmm. where, frankly, just on the numbers, a Democrat's going to have a hard time winning. It doesn't mean we shouldn't field somebody to try. We have to. But who is going to win these primaries, and what kind of personality is going to come into the legislature? And again, I don't mean issues. I don't even mean conservative or liberal. I just mean human decency, right, and respect for the institution, respect for people at a human level, so that you might vote against them 100% of the time, but you don't have to say things that are offensive at a human level and invoke hundreds of years of racial baggage and pain from the microphone in the middle of the Colorado House of Representatives. We can't have that,
Mike, I want to jump in. Kind of thinking about what Mike was saying earlier about, Mr. Holford is representing a population, and people from that area that aren't like that, but I'm relatively certain there's a contingency of people that are like that mm-hmm. identify with those statements and maybe even would push it further. I think this is kind of the conundrum and you can talk about this, the kind of conundrum that I'm seeing. It's like when they do something bad, we can't cast it onto all of their constituents. And when they do something, or when we don't like something that they have done a little bit less, we could, or even if we like it, let me just stop being negative. If we like something they did, we might not want to give all those people the credit, because there's going to be a contingency within there that would have, hey, why don't you just say buckwheat, or drop an N-bomb. I honestly was surprised, and I'm gonna get to my actual question. I was surprised we made it through Trump's first term, or his mm-hmm. only term,
without hearing him say the N-word on national television, or at least it being recorded at a rally. We're still coming back from a year where there were Black people hanging from ropes being found in public, right? There were even Hispanic people being found hanging in public. The level of decency and whatnot is seriously in question. So how much are we going to worry about decency versus worrying about getting it done? Because I don't subscribe to that thought that he's not representing those people when he goes that far, but he is representing them when he's moderated and voting logically on some sorts of policy.
Yeah, look, fair. I love this discussion we're having. This is all the hard stuff. I think Mark, as you said a few minutes ago, like, you don't watch the news as much anymore. I'll be honest. I probably don't as much as I do either, compared to years ago, for a mix of reasons. One, time I'm getting home from the Capitol at 3 a.m, I got to go to sleep anyway. But more seriously, like, it's become too sickening. All of us, like, okay, Kevin, Trump would get through the day without saying the N-word. I mean, he was probably thinking it, but he didn't say it. But every day for 4 years, we knew that he could have gone on TV or Twitter and actually said it. And even if it doesn't actually happen and cause that level of trauma, the knowledge that it really could, we got a guy in 1600 Pennsylvania Ave who really could go there, even if it doesn't happen that day, that has a psychic cost, a psychic tax.
Yeah, like the whitewashing of January 6th, right? They would have, after the fact, they would have waited 3-4 weeks and then started saying, well, it wasn't the hard R, it ended with the A, or he was quoting someone, or there would be some sort of whitewashing going on your Fox News, Newsmax, and whatnot. So I 100% agree with that.
Yeah, so we've all been dealing with that for years. All of us who are left of center, who are center, who are right of center, who are just decent, who just don't want our politics to be that way. And we're still getting over that, frankly. Like, I don't think that you get over from 4, 5, 6 years of collective trauma, quickly. But to your other question about, decency versus getting it done, frankly, I think in the Colorado House, we struggle with both every day, all the time, all day, because we have to. We are here to me, this job is policy first. This is not speeches. This is not I choose to do this, and I choose to keep going before the electorate in our district to get permission to keep doing this, because I believe the policy matters, because policy is people's lives. It's healthcare, it's education, it's do you have a home, it's can we help people get over mental health challenges, all these things. All right, this is, believe it or not, I still print some things out, paper, old school. This is the calendar for what we're doing next week. Public document, it gives the public notice what's up. And I'm looking through and I'm thinking, okay, what all are we going to be debating? And boy, we got some big ones coming up. I'm guaranteeing you there's going to be some late nights. I'm going to be warning my partner in the morning, like, hey, don't expect me home for dinner. Because that's what we're here to do, is move the big policy. And I hope that we move the big policy without things being said like we had to hear on Wednesday. And if those things are said, look, people can be, I looked this rule up, I sent it to all of our leadership. The rules of the House allow you to basically de-recognize somebody out of the well. The way it happens is you go up there, more second reading than third reading, but the person who's chairing the committee of the whole calls on Rep X or Rep Y or whatever, and okay, you're recognized to speak. And debate is unlimited in time on second reading. So somebody can talk for 2 minutes or, 62, and we've seen that. And we kind of just let it go on and on and on and whatever. And sometimes it's 10 minutes and sometimes it's 10 hours. But when somebody gets totally out of line, you can start to do things. You can say, you were no longer recognized and I'm ordering you to go sit in your seat. That's happened once in all the years that I know of. Or you can call a recess, you can go over on the side. You can, frankly, I think part of this has to be the leadership of the other party has to start to have some accountability for the behavior of their members. And I would like to see more of that personally. So, the minority leader is Rep McKean out of Loveland. I would like to see him start to control his people more. I think he tries. I'd like to see him try more.
Well, that speaks to a comment that Becca Clark-Seaver put up, if you want to pop that in there, Marcus, saying change policy instead of trying to change human hearts.
Yeah.
Right now, you're talking about the strong majority. I'm seeing comments coming in from Facebook saying y'all should double your wage, saying support labor, support the working class, education. I mean, healthcare. You're already talking about that. I say it's time to start bulldozing, because we still got people that are dropping, all these different epithets and whatnot. It's time for the Democrat Party to get to work.
Yeah. Becca, I don't know if you're hearing me on Facebook. Hello, it's been a while. I have talked about this with the speaker. I've talked about this with our assistant majority leader, Serena Gonzalez Gutierrez out of Denver, who feels these issues very strongly. I wasn't there. I was in a different committee at the same time, but some other stuff went down in the House Education Committee where a Republican member said something totally inappropriate, and it caused people to go out in the hall and talk about it and try to achieve some kind of resolution. I don't totally know where that landed, but in the same week, you have that going on, which was explicitly racial in its nature. You have what Rep. Holtorf said, which was explicitly racial in its nature. You have what somebody said to me, which was not racial in nature, but which was violent in nature. And I don't even know what else I don't know about it anymore. It's like I didn't used to go into work in this place thinking that these things were going to be even a weekly, never mind a daily occurrence. And then we have the week that we just had. I do agree, like it can be very hard to change a human heart. I mean, sometimes it can be impossible. People have to want to change. People have to see what's wrong in themselves.
Mike, you said violent in nature to you. That come from another elected official?
Came from another elected official.
Of the House, of the Colorado State House?
Yes, it did.
I know you're like anti-drama, so I won't ask the name.
Yeah.
If you want to give a name, please feel free to give a name. I gotta ask.
No, I'm still turning over in my mind where I want to go with this.
Yeah.
What happened was we were in committee. We had just adjourned committee. There's another member with whom I have a mile-wide policy dispute. I went over to talk about that policy dispute. And some sentences and words were exchanged, and then he said this thing, and it kind of knocked me back on my heels. I'm like, wow. I mean, that's kind of the stuff that like people say to each other when there are a couple drinks in at the bar. I never thought I would have that said against me here. So I shared it with some people in leadership, and some things were done, and an apology was actually extended, which is good, but it doesn't mean that it should have happened in the first place. And to be straight now, look, my way of dealing with stuff is usually to just push through because life is short and I got work to do. But I go into that place with the privileges of being a straight white cis guy that grew up in the suburbs and went to college and law school. And there's whatever I think about resolving it for myself, which isn't very much. But in the context of everything we've just been talking about and everything that just went down this week, the greater weight that I feel is that I can't let this just continue to become normalized in this place, because the next person it happens to is not going to be me, is not going to be straight white cis from the suburbs, college, law school, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I can deal with that stuff, but I have a responsibility to help make sure that people who come after me or who are there with me right now don't have to. So
I definitely agree with that. And when you were, I agree with that. I support you in going forward with that. Any way that I can help, I don't normally speak for us, but we can help. Let us know how we can help with going forward with that, because you're exactly right. And this is what I said, how they're always testing, like the Raptors on Jurassic Park, right? They always are testing the boundaries of the fence to see how far they can go. Will it be down one day? And, I look at it as my mom taught me growing up with a bully, right? Like, Hashim, you never start anything, but if someone continues with you and they put their hands on you, then you have to do what it has to take to make sure that you're safe. And I look at them like that. So I definitely support you in going forward with that. But I also think this would be good groundwork for you to run for that 8th congressional district as well, too.
Right here on DBT, yes.
I don't know what there is in the world that could convince me to do that.
I understand.
So we got it. We know that from the first. You're very kind. I mean, thank you. We know at least we have a seat. It's official. We don't know what all it's going to look like. We got this whole new commission process, and I think there's going to be a lot of people looking at that. And I hope that we elect a good progressive Democrat to represent that new part of the state, however it's divided up. I have a hard time imagining a world where that progressive Democrat is me. But
That's very nice and political of you. So can you do some quick explaining for us on how the district is breaking up? So everyone, right quick, every 10 years, when the decennial census is done, they do a population count and they see what state gets an extra congressional seat in the House, not in the Senate, because they're both Congress, but in the House, and what state would lose one. It's all based on population.
Yep.
And Colorado have the luxury of gaining an 8th seat. So that we will now have 8 members from Colorado to go to the U.S. House of Congress, House of Representatives, and represent us in Congress. What is going on with the talk of saying that it has to be 50-50 in each district? Can you explain that for the people?
Yeah. So that breakdown is pretty much exactly right. And it is all about equal population, equal representation. And crazily enough, although not crazily if you look at our history, that is only about 50 years old. You can go back to certain states in the South in the first part of the 20th century and have it where you got one congressional district with 800,000 people, another district with 200,000 people. And I'm thinking of an example from Alabama, and you could imagine kind of how those were drawn and what was happening with the representation of African American people versus white people in those districts, and you would make that guess, and you would be right. So then along come a couple of cases in the 60s that finally say, if you have districts like that, then people are not being equally represented as the Constitution requires. So that puts us where we are. Anyway, given Colorado's history of growing rapidly, for many decades now, we have been gaining a seat about every 20 years. So we gained a seat in 2000, we gained a seat in 1980, and we didn't quite get there in 2010, but here we are. So relative to the map that we have now, there's a prospect of substantial change. Part of the reality of growth is that it's very uneven. So you look at the Eastern Plains, not gaining as much, probably losing population. You look at the San Luis Valley, steady or losing population. You look at the Western Slope, very uneven. You got some high growth counties and some not. Obviously in Colorado, most of the growth is on the Front Range. So there's going to be, I think it's fair to say that whatever it looks like, the new district is going to land somewhere along the Front Range. Now, as to what it looks like, you look at election results, you look at voter registration in Colorado. We're drifting bluer compared to 10 years ago. I will not call us a blue state because I truly don't think that we are, not in the same way that some other states are in this country. But frankly, registration is plurality unaffiliated. Another couple of years, we could cross 50% unaffiliated. People are abandoning both parties. That said, they are abandoning the Republican Party more than they're abandoning the Democratic Party. So if you were to draw, I don't think the numbers are even there to have 8 districts, perfectly divided for the reasons of those basic numbers. But I think there's 2 things in what you said, Hashim. One is the principle of competitiveness. And that was a principle of districting, a value in districting that was talked about in the court case that gave us the map last year. We didn't have this commission, or last time, 10 years ago. We didn't have this commission process. So what happened is the legislature was split. There was no map via the legislature. So it went to court, and the court saw different maps and heard different arguments and finally handed down the map that we've all known now for 5 election cycles. And among the many things discussed was the idea that, consistently with equal population and the Voting Rights Act and other things like try to not split up a city or county or whatnot, where an election in a district is going to be competitive, that's good for the people because it forces candidates to work hard to stay in touch with the people. However, I stand by that. And frankly, in a fairly drawn district, I like our odds because I think the value set that we're going to set forth to the electorate is better than the other value set that we see right now for most people. And I think people would agree with that. But given the trends that have happened over the last 10 years, where people are tending to support the Democratic Party view of things, even if they're registered unaffiliated, and that's fine. That's where things are going. So if you were to see, for example, a map that consistently produced 4 Republicans and 4 Democrats all the time, I would suggest to you that that is not a fairly drawn map, because that is elevating the position of one party over where the data indicates based on statewide elections and other things. Marcus, I see Steve's question. Was that in terms of, it just popped up, it's gone from my screen, where should the district be drawn? Yeah, hard to say. Look, I think like for decades in Colorado, we've seen most or all of the Eastern Plains represented together, and that probably stays that way. Similarly, the West Slope. If you look at population, there's been a lot of population growth in Larimer County, in Adams County, in Broomfield County, in Weld County. You could imagine a district that is sort of a North Front Range district. Frankly, you could also imagine a lot of other things. It's really hard to say.
Adams County, that's Joe Salazar.
Was that?
Yep.
How do you? Because we're under the assumption that Colorado is going to draw these new districts. I won't say evenly, but there's not going to be too much partisanship in it, right? I have that belief. How do you push back when you know states like Texas or Florida, you know that they are not going to draw their map evenly or even fairly? How do you have that conversation?
Yeah, look, that's a tough one, to be honest. This country had a perfect storm in 2010 where there was backlash. A lot of it was racist backlash in the middle of President Obama's first term. And the economy was still very bad after the market crash in 2008. And all that was taken out at the ballot, and that put Republican majorities into control in a lot of states. And that was the year before the redistricting year. So then you had Republican majorities control districting in places like Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, drew maps both at the state legislative level and the congressional level that locked in, lopsided majorities for a decade. And people in the country, vis-a-vis Congress, paid the price in terms of policy outcomes. We've all been paying for 10 years. And people in these other states have continued to pay the price at the state level as well. So a few things. Since Shelby County v. Holder gutted Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, and that goes back to 2013, we have not had that mechanism for preclearance in these covered jurisdictions. And one of the things that this Congress has to do is fix the formula in Section 4 to put life back into Section 5. Another part of the Voting Rights Act that I don't think gets enough attention is Section 3, which is bail-in jurisdiction, which is where US DOJ can go to court and even in the absence of Section 5 working until Congress does something, can try to get that kind of preclearance treatment for a jurisdiction where, the problems can be shown. You guys might know the details more in terms of tracking the Supreme Court's docket, but kind of the only thing left right now in the Voting Rights Act is Section 2, which is not the preclearance mechanism. It's the part of the Voting Rights Act that lays down a standard of not sort of diminishing the voting power of minority communities in districting. And I believe the US Supreme Court has just taken cert on a case that could really mess that up. And I'm pretty scared of anything the Supreme Court touches right now with the current makeup, which is part of why in Y and Z, the 2018 amendments here that put into place our processes, there was language in there, which is now in the state constitution, that created some comparable provisions as a matter of state law. So whatever the US Supreme Court might do to Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act federally, we have similar protections in state law that we enforce in the state court. And that goes back to the core question, which is if federal courts have been all messed up by Trumpian jurisprudence for many years now, if federal courts will not provide a remedy, I think advocates of fair districting need to get creative and aggressive in challenging maps under state law, including and especially state constitutional provisions in state courts. Because obviously when you plead out claims that are state in nature, you may want to try to keep yourself out of federal court, which is a real shame, because go back 50 years, the federal courts were a big part of actually getting civil rights reforms done. They were a place to go to move things forward. And now, now we've got to worry it's the other way.
Yeah. And those two cases come out of Arizona, by the way. So just throwing that out there. So Kevin, I know you wanted to transition a little bit.
No, I just, of course, we got the felony murder legislation through, and I wanted to just get your rundown of what you think about that, and just talk to me about it. I'm not a legislator. Talk to the community about what that really means to people.
Yeah, so thank you. So it's Senate Bill 124, and the governor has signed it. It's law, and there was actually a signing ceremony. I mean, and I wasn't necessarily expecting that because it's a controversial topic, but it was even in person. I mean, we all had the vaccine, and there's distancing and masks and so forth. So there was a short ceremony in the West Foyer of the Capitol where the governor spoke and Senator Lee spoke, and I spoke about what the bill does and what it means and why, and the history of the issue, and certainly calling out the racial inequities of the application of felony murder was part of all that. So as we've talked about before, it was at the same time kind of a modest change in that the law is still there on the books as an F2, but by getting it out of life and for adults, life without the possibility of parole category, and making some of the other more modest changes that we talked about, that's really big. I know that it came too late for one situation that we've talked about here, but it is going to really better balance, how those discussions go leading up to trial in certain situations, and where something does go to trial and where there is a sentence entering on that count, it's going to mean a whole lot of a less unjust outcome for people who face that charge. I've gotten some pretty powerful emails on the subject from people both before and after the bill. And I actually just got an email from somebody who's working on a clemency application for somebody who went in on life a number of years ago and sent me some materials to review and so forth. And I got to get on that, and it might even end up being possible to talk to this fellow, and we'll see if maybe I can get behind that effort. I mean, I don't know precisely how many people are inside right now, but of course the power of clemency is invested in the governor by the Constitution, and it's a pretty broad power. And personally, I do hope that that people will seek that and make their case through the Executive Clemency Board process, and at least ask if, having done in a lot of cases decades, their sentence could be sort of conformed to the new law that would apply to them under the same facts if what happened, say, 30 years ago happened, next year instead. And then maybe having, done a lot of time already and done some penance, could earn the right to walk free in the world and contribute again.
So the new bill, it's 16 to 48, right? So if they've done more than 16, or if they've done a commensurate amount of time for their actual role in the incident, because I was reading Channel 7's coverage of it, and they're talking about one person testified about, her father was killed walking in a robbery. And she really wanted to make sure that we don't do this, but sometimes you got to think about the other side of it.
Right.
What about someone that's victimized by being forced to be a part of a situation where someone ended up being killed? If you as a black man, just growing up in certain surroundings, sometimes you're around people that have done a few things, and if you can get tied to being in their presence somewhere near that time, you could be facing a lifetime sentence in some ways. So I understand both sides of it. I'm glad it passed. I like the idea of people being able to understand where other people are coming from. Because in this case, I'm not mad at the opposition. I'm glad that this bill passed, though. I understand where the other side is exactly.
Yeah, I mean, so look, in terms of things happening, I mean, there were some really heavy things said in committee. And if Kevin, let me make sure I'm tracking your question. Opposition meaning folks who are victims and survivors of crimes. You talking like that? Yeah. I mean, this is a key thing, and I think that unfortunately this point got lost in some of the debate. I never said there should not be some consequence if something happens. You can talk about the other charges that can be leveled under existing law that we were never talking about changing, and it's kind of really unfortunate that we happen to be debating this bill at the same time that the massacre happened up in Boulder, and the law has never needed felony murder to get that kind of thing. The counts filed there were intent and deliberation, a whole different section of the law. So all we were saying here is that the offense we're talking about better fits with a different kind of penalty, that it doesn't fit with life. Look, I'm thinking back to House second reading on the floor. I mean, we heard some brutal things. People do some brutal things sometimes. But then there's also these cases where the law has gotten the wrong person, and there are the stories that you alluded to, and there are certainly, and there have been, racial inequities. I mean, you can look at the fiscal note, the official document prepared by nonpartisan staff, and it points that out. And, you probably know a lawyer retired now, mostly named Phil Cherner, and he often reps the Sam Carey Association and comes in and testifies. And he's done some work that it shows even more powerfully the racial inequities of how felony murder is used. I mean, it's horrific in terms of, you look at the percentage of people in the state who are African-American versus the percentage of felony murder counts, charges, convictions. It's grotesquely imbalanced. I just saw a question pop up from Becca about parole, and this is a key point. When somebody goes up, and this has been true since about 1990, when somebody is sent up on LWOP, the parole board is cut out. Until the law changed in, it was 88, 90, 92 or so, I'd have to research it. We used to have life with the possibility of parole after 40 years. So there was still that zone of discretion for the parole board. At that point, looking back, obviously before my time in there, but that was kind of in the earlier middle phases of the sort of crackdown era and the super predator narrative and all the stuff that was going on in the news and in the law. And that is probably part of why that changed. And when somebody is sentenced on life without the possibility of parole, that's what it means. That means, there might be gubernatorial clemency, but otherwise you're pretty much going to die inside.
Real quickly, Steve Douglas had put up, he said this twice.
Yeah.
Is that the greenhouse gases one?
Yeah. So this is kind of nuts. I'm actually co-sponsoring this bill with Rep. Jackson when it comes over to the House, and with Senator Winter and I believe Senator Moreno in the Senate. And first, I committed to Rep. Jackson and Senator Winter. I'll do this with you because I got a background in environmental law, and for some reason they didn't print me on the front of it. But this has gone through Senate Transportation and Energy Committee, and it's gone through Senate Finance Committee, and there have been these explicit veto threats, which is obviously a place where I disagree with the governor on this point. We passed a bill 2 years ago that got a lot of attention, House Bill 1261, that just said, hey, we got a climate change problem. Let's set forth some goals progressively over time to lower our emissions, to do our part so that the world is something like habitable in 2100 AD for our kids and grandkids. There was sort of not as many specifics in that bill as you might have expected, and that was a result of what was politically possible at the time. So along comes Senate Bill 200 to simply say, all right, now we have to take the next step and make it more specific and more real. We are not trying to achieve any benchmarks that were not already set out in that prior bill, or really any more than is discussed in the administration's own greenhouse gas report, which is something you can find on the state website. The basic approach is to go sector by sector, so electric power, transportation, buildings. There's been an extremely detailed sectoral analysis of where is the problem, where are the emissions coming from. So if we want to have if we want to get to a specific end place, we should have specific ways in which we hold ourselves to getting there. That's all the bill says. But this is a fast-changing environment. Along comes new technology, along come price changes. Maybe there's a better way to do it. So there's language in the bill that says, look, we think that there should be a sector-by-sector approach because that's the way we've all been thinking about this problem and talking about it for years. But if some other approach, like a sectorally crossing over cap and trade system, can get there for less money or can get farther for the same money, then that's okay too. So honestly, I don't know. This has to go the rest of the way through the Senate before it comes over to the House and we take it up. And we've got a lot of work to do. But,
quick question. Do you think it'll die in committee? Because Colorado, the mountain state, the beautiful outdoor state. I'm like, would Governor Polis really risk vetoing this bill in his election year?
I hope not. So here's the deal. Let me get a new browser tab open and check out where this is. I believe this still has to go through the Senate Appropriations Committee, which is
that's correct.
Let's see.
Mike, do you plan on primarying the governor?
On the calendar this week. Okay. So, look, I think it comes through Senate Appropriations. The chair is Chris Hansen. He's done a lot of work in the climate and energy space. Usually appropriations is quick. I was actually sitting over there Friday morning for some other bills, and I saw some stuff get gummed up with amendments and talk and so forth. But I think it comes out of Senate Appropriations. Then the question is getting off the floor of the Senate, because 2 years ago for 1219, we got it out of the House after God knows how many hours. And then I think they went till, 3 in the morning, might have been 5 in the morning, doing that bill in the Senate. So those are I'm going to cross my fingers and say that I'm not too worried about the committee, but Senate floor is going to be the big one. And then, I can't imagine that bill comes to any other committee than House Energy and Environment, where I serve on, and Rep. Jackson too. And then, we pick it up in the House, we keep fighting. I want to say that I'm cautiously optimistic that we can put the bill on the governor's desk.
Gotcha. And I think you missed my question, or else you intentionally ignored it.
Hopefully,
the governor. I will ask it again. If the governor vetoes this bill, will you primary the governor for his next gubernatorial race?
I do not foresee primarying the governor. But upstream of that, I'm going to commit myself a little bit to the power of positive thinking and say that I do not believe the governor will veto it after all.
Gotcha. I hope not.
Speaking of primarying people and talking about the electoral process, this, ladies and gentlemen, more speaks to why elections are so important. We can actually stop people from being thrown away for life because they're in a situation where someone ended up passing away and they didn't do the act. We can change things with climate change. So earlier, someone commented that they would max out donations to you, Mike Weissman. Candidates like this that speak to serious issues that affect you, you need to come up with a few bucks. Maybe not all at once, maybe over a few months. As soon as they declare they're running for office again, whatever office people like Rep. Weissman are running for, because he's actually out here doing work. And we have a ton of them that come on this show that are doing real work.
Yep.
Need to really be supported in the electoral process, not just one vote, one max out to the campaign.
Yeah. Well, you are very kind, Kevin. Look, obviously that's not why I come on this show. I come on the show because I love having the real talk, and I think it's important to air out details about these big issues in a way that gets beyond the crazy bubble that is that building sometimes, and that is accessible to people out there in the world. And I'll do this anytime. But that said, I appreciate your saying that. I will be running for re-election next year. And like we were saying before, it's going to be a different district, population growth equals change. I have a lot of the fast growing parts of Aurora. I'm probably over the average number right now. I don't know what the Aurora map is going to look like. All I know is that I'm not going to be outworked.
Question. Can they cut you out of the map? Okay. Let me explain that. So when they go through and they redistrict,
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, but just for our viewers that might not understand. Mm-hmm. So right now, Representative Weissman is the House rep for House District 36. The furthermost west border is like Chambers.
Yep.
So if they redistrict it and move it in, I'm really close to Chambers. Yep. I don't need it to move. I don't want to leave. I want to be in 36. But let's say if you lived right there at the corner of Chambers where that happened, if they moved it over to Laredo, it would cut you out. And then what happens? Do you think it'll happen? If it happens, what happens to HD 36 seat?
Yeah,
sure. Everybody in the state is going to live in some of the 65 House districts. And everybody currently serving in the House who is not termed out and prevented from running again anyway is going to end up in some district. Question is, all right, which one? Obviously, I'm expecting 36 will change. It has to. I'm used to, representing a certain community. I've spent years trying to sort of understand the issues in the different parts of this community, and this district is a microcosm of Aurora. It's incredibly diverse, and you go down to like the south end, and the issues are not the same as up here where we live, and they're not the same now as they were, even 6 years ago. Anyway, so I hope that the district that I'm running in for my last term in the House is more familiar to me than not, and it may or may not be that way. You look at the current lines, you look at population dynamics. Honestly, there is a chance where so right now the line, the district to the west of me that Rep. Jackson represents is 42, and the line, like you said, is Chambers. What if that line moves to the east? All right, I don't know. Or the next thing is less likely to happen because counties are generally not split except when really necessary. But I live 4 blocks south of Colfax. Colfax is the county line with Adams County. What if I get drawn into Adams County? All right. I mean, I don't know. All of us are bracing for this. I've had conversations with colleagues who are also wondering. I mean, obviously, we are committed to why we are doing what we are doing, and we want to keep doing it. I mean, I have colleagues who just won their first election. They have a number of years that they can continue to serve and go to bat for. And I'm thinking of one in particular, and I really like what she's doing, and I really want her to keep having a chance to serve. And I hope that some weird thing like lines drifting all over and making a difficult situation for her doesn't keep her from doing that. So we'll see. The timing. Oh man, we could spend a whole other hour talking about this. We probably should if you guys will have me, but some other time. I mean, because everybody's got to eat dinner. But the timing of Trump, the pandemic, and Trump screwing up the census has messed with this year's redistricting process in a way like we've probably never seen. Normally, all the states would already have the census data like months ago. And now what the census is saying is we're not going to be able to get you sort of the full final thing looking pretty until September, but we'll be able to get you something that's at least the right data, but maybe is in an old format like August 31, which is really going to put the hurry up on our process here and every other state's process. And we have a bill trying to address that and an interrogatory to the Supreme Court that they just took on Thursday about that, basically saying, hey, can we do the preliminary maps and start to get some information out to the community with the best estimated data that we can use, just so that there's this chance for public input, which is important, and then do the final map that has to be legally population balanced for all the reasons that we talked about with the final data after we get it. We don't know where all that's going to land, but as if the whole districting process wasn't hard enough, now we got this on top of it. So, the whole rest of this year is going to be real interesting, but I hope it all happens in time. I hope the Supreme Court reviews the maps in time, and then, by about the end of this year, kind of everybody knows, all right, what district do I live in? Who am I voting for? And all this stuff. And 22 is going to be real interesting.
Yeah, it is. And I want to double down on what Kevin said. This is exactly why elections are so important. People always want to say politics are boring, and it's like, if you look at it, it's really not. Politics is into everything that you do. There is not one thing you do that politics has said, I don't have a hand in that. And this is why it's so important for people to get out and vote bottom up, top down, middle out, like everything should be voted upon. You should research it. I am a Democrat through and through, so I definitely always push the Dem vote. But I encourage you, don't be foolish with your voting. It's so important, and so many things are affected by it. Trump is out of office, right? But yet what happened underneath him, and I'm talking about this from the census aspect, will last, and it could at least 10 years. but it would it could possibly last a lifetime, a couple of generations, and so much is determined upon that. Even we haven't talked about resources that go into the districts based upon those numbers, but it's just so important. We're on another election year right now, right? I mean, it's we're not in November. We won't be electing anything for Colorado State House, Colorado State Senate, or for the federal level, but we have local municipal stuff going on, and this is where the other side, my nemesis, they focus well in on these off-year elections, and it hurts the masses of people. So, I mean, I know we're over time. I know they want me to wrap it up, but I implore people to vote their interests. Don't vote taking care of someone else's dreams. Don't vote taking care of your dreams that you've yet to see come into fruition. Vote your current interest.
Well, vote your current interest, and all right, I'm going to try to end on a big theme here. Vote your current interest and your dream. Vote the way that you want the world to be. Now, look, politics is a frustratingly incremental process, and if you don't like who is in there, if you don't like who you have the choice to vote for, start thinking about being that person that other people are going to vote for. Like, growing up, my mom was involved in politics a little bit, but I didn't have like the grandfather who was governor or any of this stuff. You rewind 40 years, 30 years, 20 years, honestly, like, even 10. I never thought I would be doing this. I did not see myself as the person who was going to grow up and do this. But it got to where, I started helping out in campaigns and volunteering and learning about things. And it's like, all right, I still don't think I'm the person who like looks good on TV or whatever, but I care about policy and I don't mind working hard. So, all right, I'll throw myself into it and see what I can do. And here we are. And, there's people because of like, just differential challenges in life and like how you grow up, and maybe you struggle with poverty, you struggle with one parent, you struggle with God knows what. It's easy to look at who is in the political space at the city level, like you're saying, or state level, whatever, and think that that's always something that somebody else is going to do, that it can never be you. And if you do not feel called to it, then that's okay. There's a lot of ways to get involved in things that matter and change in the world. But if I would just say this to anybody listening, like don't rule yourself out. Don't tell yourself that it will always be somebody else. There's more and more different training programs out there. I'm always happy, and candidly, it's easier out of session sometime when I'm not doing 90 hours a week. But people want to talk about, hey, I want to run for XYZ down the road, and here's my background, here's why I care, how do I do it, how do I organize my universe of supporters who will help me out, how do I raise money, do all this stuff. I'm pretty much always willing to talk to somebody about that kind of thing. And I think a lot of us are the privileged to be in elected office would say the same thing.
Well, that was we there's so much more that we have left to discuss. There's just not enough time, which is probably why we probably need to make this a monthly thing, if your schedule permits, quite frankly.
Yeah, look, I mean, we're just getting to the big stuff. So I'm dropping a link in there now. We've talked about the record ceiling bill. This is moving along. It passed out of Appropriations Committee Friday morning. Rep. Bacon out of Denver is officially on as a co-prime sponsor with me. It will be on the House floor for second reading Monday morning, and then probably third reading, the final recorded vote that goes in the journal and sends it over to the Senate Tuesday morning. Right now, bill's in pretty good shape. This is crazy. I've never had a bill like this. The only opposition is from the press, is from the Colorado Press Association, certain papers. And that's such a big conversation, and I'll get so wound up about it. We probably shouldn't even go there right now. But just to say, folks can read the bill there, read the pre-amended version, which is the latest text. If you're in a different area, than 36, than Aurora, contact your representative, encourage them to support it. Do keep an eye on the Senate. Again, tighter margins there, but I think, I have very strong sponsors there in Senator Lee and Senator Coleman. It's just unfortunate to be doing battle with the press itself on this issue. I know why, they say it's about information and reporting. I would just call out, if you read their editorials against the bill, they will talk about things like reporting on police misconduct and police accountability. And look, I don't think any of us here is a stranger to all of that. And I think that we would acknowledge the role of the press in that. But I think there's another value, and that is letting people get on with their lives who've already done the time. There's also the saying, that I first heard many years ago from the disability advocacy community, which is nothing about us without us. What we're talking about is the ability of system-involved people to do their time and get on and have a second chance. And the organizations that, that advocate on those issues are for the bill. They're not against it, ACLU, CCJRC. I think it's telling that two of the biggest survivor advocacy organizations in the state that I've talked to extensively about this bill are in support and not opposed. They're not even neutral, they're supporting. Because if you really dig into what gets people mixed up in the system, a lot of the times it is having been victimized themselves. It is somebody who has suffered domestic violence. It is somebody who has suffered sexual violence, dealing with that trauma by drugs, alcohol, maybe even low-level other crime to support the habit, whatever. And I can hardly think of a greater injustice than somebody having been victimized in that way, getting tangled up in drugs, and now the system is penalizing them on top of they were already victimized in an awful way.
Yep.
So anyway, hoping to move that bill on. Hashim, I'm seeing we're past time. Thank you all for the time and the conversation.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
You have an open invite.
Always.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll just text me when is the next time that we should do this, and we'll talk some more.
Nice.
Definitely. Everyone, with that, thank y'all for tuning in. Always a great conversation about what's going on in our local politics. Local politics matters. This is what you should be paying attention to. With that, Dope Black Thoughts out. Peace.
Right. Good night, everybody.
What is love? It's a drug. They the rotate, didn't hit back in it. Calling me an Uber just to hit back in it. Use the cash out like fake, I send it. Is it really worth the wait? I don't.